What's up, guys? This talk is on strength relations, and so it doesn't sound like the most exciting talk in the world off the bat, but it's actually a really interesting discussion here. I'm excited to dive into it a little bit. Just to give you some background, it does stem from the book Super Training by Yuri Verkhoshansky and Mel Siff. So if any of you guys at home are curious about learning a little bit more on this topic, I suggest you check out the book. We're going to dive into some of the topics they discuss there, but it's a really large book, and this also goes in a little more detail on the specific topic, just from my standpoint. So let's just dive straight into it. So when it comes to relationships, there's what they call direct and indirect. So direct relationship is where improvement in A leads to improvement in B. If I do this exercise, this other exercise will get better, or this quality will get better. Then there's an indirect relationship. Improvement in A leads to an improvement in B, which leads to an improvement in C. But A does not directly improve C. So let's talk about those in terms that you might understand outside of A and B. So think about this in terms of a counter movement jump. A squat. A is a squat or relative strength, even better. B is counter movement jump. I increase A, B increases. Great. A is relative strength. B is squat. Wow, I can't speak this morning. A is relative strength. B is still jump height. And C is reactive strength index. Well, A improves jump height, which is B. B can improve C, which is our RSI, but squatting more doesn't necessarily correlate to having a better RSI. So A helps build B, and B and C are connected. A and C are indirectly connected, an indirect relationship because A fosters the growth of B and C. A being indirect, B and C being direct in that case. And even A and B being direct, but A and C are not direct, they're indirect. So here's an RSI example of an indirect relationship. So we kind of just mentioned one earlier, but I'll go into it again. We have absolute strength or relative strength. That's related to vertical stiffness. And vertical stiffness is directly related to RSI. But RSI is not directly related to your absolute strength, say, of a squat. So we have direct, and indirect. And what's key here is at times we don't appreciate these indirect relationships. Here's a great example. Let's just use another one. I'll go back one here at C. I'll pretend this is jump height. We'll pretend B is our back squat. And A is a back extension. Doing back extensions can directly help your back squat. Your back squat can directly help your jump height. Back extensions don't help your jump height directly. Why? Because back extensions help formulate the base from which the back squat can be done. And these same relationships, that's true. There's direct and indirect relationships. So things change too. So this is also a pretty interesting one. We talk about relationships, and by the way, the reason why I want to know relationships, if we can know these better and understand which exercises improve, certain attributes and qualities of sport, then we can probably get a little bit more out of training. So things change, and this is actually if you actually look into our research, not my personally, but the research out there in the U.S., you can find this, but this is actually from Russia. They talk about as well. Things change, and this relationship between squat to sprint time. Early on, squat and sprint time have a direct, strong relationship. As you squat more and get stronger, sprint times go down. But as you increase your proficiency at sprinting, this relationship becomes moderate and even weaker. So it doesn't mean if you constantly improve squatting, sprint time is forever going to go up. In the early stages of development, certain exercises might be highly related to a certain outcome. So like a squat would be highly related to a faster sprint time. But as we get stronger and more proficient, other strength qualities emerge that might play a more important role. certain aspects that you could say maybe as this falls off and becomes weaker, explosive reactive strength becomes better. Maybe not better, but more important. Vertical stiffness, other qualities begin to manifest as important contributing factors. So to only think in isolation that a squat, the motor ability of a squat improves sprinting, we might fall short a little bit because at a certain point in time, that relationship diminishes. And that's for many other relationships as well. What happens early on and improves early on doesn't always improve what happens later on. So motor ability, what works now, what doesn't work later. Not always, but sometimes. Right? We don't, things change. So we want to test and assess, train with a purpose, and assumptions are dangerous. So here's a convoluted little graph, which I promise will make a little bit of sense as we dive into it. Let's say we want to improve explosive elasticity, our ability to perform highly explosive elastic movements. Sprinting might fall in that category. High-level plyometrics might fall into that category, a depth jump. Things that are highly dynamic and require elastic contributions. To get there, we got to recognize the development of motor abilities. So we have absolute hip extensor strength, absolute knee extensor strength. That helps develop explosive strength, plantar flexor strength, tendon stiffness helps develop elastic strength. Together, explosive strength and elastic strength help develop explosive elastic strength. So these are different motor abilities. We go from traditional absolute qualities that then get developed and transformed into more complex qualities. So on the surface, you might be like, what the hell are you talking about, Max? Explosive strength and elastic strength and all this stuff. Well, let's just make it simple. This is early on, where your hip extensor strength, your knee extensor strength, they contribute to sprinting early on. They play a role. Your plantar flexor strength, your tendon stiffness plays a role really early on. However, as the movement itself develops, new motor qualities begin to emerge and manifest. Once you have absolute strength developed, then you can develop explosive strength. And once you have explosive strength and elastic strength, you can actually develop explosive elastic strength. So there's a great example of this. Let's say we're talking about a lineman. A lineman has to, move another lineman with some level of velocity and force. But if we want to be moving someone or another object fast that weighs a lot, we first have to get strong. So getting strong initially is going to help that lineman move heavy things faster. But at a certain point, just getting stronger isn't going to help them move things faster. They need to develop the specific qualities within it, the ability to be explosive and strong. So to develop explosive elastic strength, you can't just do explosive elastic movements. You have to have the base motor qualities of absolute hip extensor strength and knee extensor strength. You have to have the core qualities. And once you develop the core qualities, they can morph into new ones, which is why if we go back here, the squat is initially a core quality that develops absolute hip extensor and knee extensor strength. But as you get stronger and more proficient at sprinting, it's not all based on your absolute knee extensor strength, but it's can you morph your qualities that you have developed into new ones, which is why if you go to this one on the right, this is actually pretty low level in regards to the hierarchy of development, but it's necessary. Again, these are base qualities. They can be morphed into certain specific qualities that are then utilized in sport itself. So our mistake, we stop too short. Squat leads to jump height, leads to sprint. We like to stop and say squat leads to jump height. And we know jump height's related to sprinting. Therefore, if we squat, we sprint faster. But we don't always look at that in the highest level athletes because as someone gets higher, this relationship becomes less strong and a little more convoluted. develop specific tests that represent specific motor abilities. If I want to look at explosive elastic strength, well, a high depth jump isn't a bad idea, but maybe I want to look at it in regards to my sport itself. So I want to look at an approach jump or some type of multi-step jump. So you're developing tests that represent these newly formed motor abilities, tests that are more specific to the quality you're actually trying to develop. Motor abilities change, right? They merge, or not necessarily they change, but the priority changes, they merge into new ones. Once you develop strength, you can develop explosive strength. You can't develop explosive strength without strength. It doesn't make any sense. You can't develop explosive elastic strength if you're not explosive or elastic. You have base qualities that eventually merge into new ones. Dynamic interactions, what is good once is not always good again. So understanding these relationships is important. As a coach, it puts a little bit of a burden on you to A, dive into some of the details a little more, but B, maybe develop specific tests that you deem most important. Don't just think you have to squat and that's the best representation of explosive strength or whatever strength it might be. That's just one small variable of relative strength. But there's multiple factors that go into an actual motor quality. And so if we just stop at base level qualities, if I go back, we just only measure these bottom ones and we don't assess these top ones, we don't know if motor qualities are merging into each other and forming the quality we potentially want the athlete to have. So let's not just stop at squat, bench, deadlift, and counter movement jump height. Those aren't qualities or testing merging qualities. We want to find out what the motor abilities actually are of the athlete. So we got to take steps a little bit further, make training a little more specific, right? Don't be afraid to be a little logical and say, oh, squatting's not enough. Let's dive into it a little bit deeper. So I appreciate you guys listening. Hopefully that makes sense. And it's a kind of a complicated topic, but it's something that's very useful because it helps us better program, design, assess, and understand an athlete and how we can get the most out of them. So appreciate you guys listening and take care.